In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about lists in Python. So we're starting to talk about the different data structures we have. And one of the real powers of Python is the built-in data structures. If you ever took data structures class and had to do them all in C++, you'll know there's a fair bit of work there, okay? So lists then are going to be a mutable is important, sequence of items that are not all the same type necessarily. I mean, they could be, but they don't have to be, okay? So they're similar in some ways to strings, except that strings are immutable. You can't change the individual items, and strings all are contained of the same type of characters inside of there, so you can't have mixed type, okay? I guess lists are the Python version of like arrays in C++, but with the difference being that, of course, arrays in C++ have to all be the same type, and they can be any type you want in Python. There's also a bunch of built-in functions, built-in methods for the lists, okay? So I've got some code here just to have some examples to talk through, okay? So the punctuation marks you use are very important. So we're going to later talk about tuples and dictionaries and sets. All those have their own identifying punctuation, okay? So in this case, the list use square brackets, okay? So if I just use the two square brackets together, that's an empty list. You can create a list that's empty like that. You can also fully specify the list, okay? You just put whatever you want. In this case, we've got a double, we've got a string, we've got a Boolean, we've got an integer, all separated by commas. Perfectly okay to do that, okay? Now, if you try to access something, so the indexes work like they do in C++, in that we have the 0, 1, 2, 3 are valid for that list one I just created. If you were to try to access something else, like 10, okay, or even 4, then it's going to give you an index error. Okay, we've talked about exceptions, so you would have to do a try block and catch that exception if you wanted to deal with it, okay? One thing I will also say is kind of interesting, and I don't have an example here, but -1 refers to the last item of the list, and you can go backwards if you want to count backwards, okay? So list, again, can contain any data type, including other lists. So you could put this all in one line, but it's kind of Python normal form to, after the comma there, put in, hit the space bar to line them up in your code, okay? And PyCharm did that for me automatically, okay? So in this case, it looks like it's a 3x3 matrix, but as far as Python's concerned, it's a list of 3 items. Each of those items happens to be a list of 3 items, okay? You can throw more or less items in the rows, and it's no longer a mathematical matrix, but Python won't have a problem with it, okay? So as far as accessing those, sorry, if I wanted to get to that first row, okay, the 1, 2, 3, I would do it by just using one index. Okay, so 0's the first row, 1's the second row, 2's the third row. If I want to get to elements inside of there, I would do 0, 0. So that means go to which of the outer elements. Okay, so there are 3 elements in M. So I'm going to go to this first one, M0. In this M0, what's 0th element? And that's going to be the 1. Okay. You can just print out your lists, and they will look, you can see here at the bottom, it just prints them out in the brackets. Okay, so nothing particularly weird there. Okay, lists are mutable. Okay, so I've skipped ahead, we'll go back in a second. So I can change any individual item at any time to whatever I want. Okay, and for most, actually for all of the sequence data types that we're going to talk about, we're going to be able to iterate through them with a for loop. Okay, so I can say for x in list 1, print x. So x will take on the value of, where's my list 1? Do I have a list 1? No, I don't have a list 1 yet. Anyway, if I had a list 1, it would just go through those options. Okay, so there's my list 1. So that would, x would be 3.2, then x would be Bob, then x would be false, then x would be 15 with my iterations. Okay. It's also pretty common. You can append new items to the end of the list. Okay. So that list 1 I just showed, if I appended a 67, it goes to the end. Okay. When it comes to removing items, we have multiple ways to do that. Okay. The first way we can do that is just to use the delete command to delete some indexed position. So I can delete name bracket 0 or name bracket whatever is a valid index of names. Okay. We can also do a pop. Okay, a pop is going to return the last items. So you want to usually print it out or save it as something. Okay, unless you just want to get rid of it and you don't care. But it also removes it from the end of the list. Okay, and then the remove allows you to specify which value you want to remove. Okay, so our names has Jeff, Bill, Alice, Carol, Bob, and Alex. So if I say remove Alice, sorry, it would remove Alice from the list. Okay, so again, whether you want to remove it by index would be with the delete, remove just the one at the end via pop, or remove a particular value. Okay. So note that if the value doesn't exist, it gives you an error that you would have to capture, okay, and deal with in some ways. Okay. You can also sort the list. So there's the list name.sort. Okay. That will put it into alphabetical order or numerical order, whichever it means. Okay. It affects the list when you do that. So you don't have to say names equals names.sort. Okay. If you want to preserve the initial value, you have to make a copy before you sort it. Okay, that happens to be important. Okay. There's also a count function. The count function takes a value and then gives you how many items of that value there are in the list. So I've got this XX list here, 1, 2, 3, 2, 4, 2, 5. And if I print out the XX count 2, it would return 3. There are 3 instances of 2 in that string. Okay. So something else that you can do here, you can ask it, of course, you can do the end. So I can say, for the XX, I could say 3 in XX would return a true. I could say 7 in XX would return a false. Okay. But you can also return the first or the index of the first occurrence of that item in the string. Okay. So if I would say print xx.index3, it's going to return 0, 1, 2. Okay. Go ahead and run that. You see that the last thing that it does should be this 2 down here. Okay. Now, if you try to do something that it doesn't have, like 33, and you run it, okay, you'll see that it's going to give us an error here, a value error. Okay. So those are some important things to think about with lists. Okay. Lists are very useful for us in Python. We're going to use them. We've already used them. We'll continue to use them. But this is a little more information about those lists.